I'd invite you to open your pew Bibles to page 489, the very beginning of the Psalms. And we'll read Psalm 1 together, as is our custom. You will be even, I will be odd. It's on page 489. And this is Psalm 1. Listen now for a word from God. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, maybe it's because of so many graduations or seeing pictures of all these graduation cakes on Facebook, but I'm sort of taken back in my experience, taken back to the beginning of my journey of all these graduations. It was the fall, and my dad and I got in our car and we drove 637 miles to the campus of Tusculum College. It said on the brochure, Tusculum College, nestled in the Smoky Mountains, teaches the values of civic republicanism in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I thought, okay, sounds all right. So we went down, and I was certain that the campus pastor had been lighting candles all week, sacrificing animals, doing whatever he had to do, because as soon as we got onto campus, all the leaves changed. It was beautiful fall in Appalachia. And even the mountains of North Carolina were in on it because they were right there in the backdrop. And it was such a clear day. And I thought, maybe this is better than all right. Well, then they got all of us prospective students and our parents into the black box theater. We were to be addressed by the president of the university, the college. And he was there. He was a big man. I learned later that he was actually on the roster for the Houston Oilers, of all things. And he had a PhD from Union Theological Seminary. So I was incredibly impressed. I thought, this will be certainly even better than all right. And he started to speak. And he said, several years ago, George Lucas made a series of films that asked questions about what it means to live the good life and to pursue justice and fight against evil. And I thought, he's talking about Star Wars. This is amazing. I felt like Ruth, from the Bible, where you will go, I will go. You will be my president, and I will be your student. Please, never let me not matriculate to your university. I am not ashamed to say that I began as a student at Tusculum College, probably because of Star Wars. I'm not ashamed to say that. I like Star Wars. I do. But I like Star Wars as a Presbyterian would. I like Star Wars decently and in order. For example, I know that the designer Mark Echo created a sweatshirt that is furry and zips up the front and has a bandolier with a hood, and you look like Chewbacca. I know that exists, and that it often sells on eBay for $330. I don't have that, but I know it exists. That's what I'm talking about when I say I like Star Wars decently and in order. I know that Star Wars is coming out in 200 days. I know that, and that you can search that on your phone, and it'll tell you at www.howmanydaysuntilstarwars.com. I know that. And I'm going to go see it that day. But I'm not going to wait in a long line to go see it. And I'm certainly not going to dress up. This is as dressed up as I get. The only robe I need, I don't need to wear this and I wave a stick. That would not be decently and orderly. So that's what I'm talking about when I say I like Star Wars, but I like it decently and in order. And if I'm pressed, I'd have to say that I'm a Yoda man. Yoda is my guy, my favorite character. Because Yoda is about wisdom. He's about philosophy. Yoda would understand St. James when he says, "Be ye doers of the word and not merely hearers." Because Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. I was standing next to Coach Meintz watching a little YMCA soccer game. And I don't know how the conversation came around to Star Wars, but it did. And he said, do or do not. There is no try. And I said, I know. And he said, I told some girls on my soccer team that. I said, girls, do or do not, there is no try. And he said, they looked at me with a dial tone expression. And I said, oh, how old are you? Are you about 38 or 39? And he said, yes. I said, oh, I put my hand on his shoulder. We had a moment. We understand Yoda. Yoda would understand the angel Gabriel, who tells Mary, nothing is impossible with God. Because Yoda tells Luke to raise the X-Wing out of the swamp of Dagobah, and Luke says it's impossible. And then Yoda does it. He does the impossible. So Yoda's my guy. Yoda brings all the philosophy and the theology of Star Wars to the front. Makes us wrestle with tough questions. And that's why when I think of Psalm 1, I sometimes think of Yoda. Psalm 1 is a psalm that Yoda could really get behind because it's a wisdom psalm that asks us about what it is to live the good life, asks us to look at our lives and ask questions. Psalm 1 is at the very front of the Psalter, and there's early manuscript evidence that indicates that some people didn't even think of Psalm 1 as really part of the Psalms. It was like a preface or a prologue to sort of get our minds going about what the Psalms might be about. And they're about God's law, God's Torah, or instruction or teaching. And so the Psalms, there are 5 books. If you've ever been reading and got to the end of 41 and turned the page and it says book 2, well, there's 5 books of the Psalms. And those 5 books sort of mirror back the first 5 books of the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, right? So they sort of mirror back to that, to remind the people that this is God's way, this is God's story. God is leading the people on this journey of faith. And that's what Psalm 1 does. It sort of sets the tone for what it is to follow God's way, God's law, God's Torah. I want to read to you another translation of Psalm 1, a poetic translation by the scholar Robert Alter, who taught for years at Berkeley, a wonderful Jewish scholar that I know you've heard me say his name before. Now, I say this is a poetic translation, but it doesn't mean that it's completely ununderstandable and awful, therefore it must be poetry. That's not what I'm talking about. It's actually very good. Happy the man who has not walked in the wicked's counsel, nor in the way of offenders has stood, nor in the session of scoffers has sat. But the Lord's teaching is his desire, and his teaching he murmurs day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by streams of water, that bears its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. And in all that he does he prospers. Not so the wicked, but like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand up in judgment, nor offenders in the band of the righteous. For the Lord embraces the way of the righteous, and the way of the wicked is lost. When I hear that again, when I hear Alter's translation, I'm invited. I'm invited to follow God's way. I'm invited to walk in God's way, God's Torah, God's teaching, God's instruction. This psalm is an invitation to me to sort of check myself and ask, how am I doing? In what way am I walking? Am I in the session of the scoffers? Or am I following God's way to true happiness and contentment and joy? Hold on. So, pardon me. So, how do we do that? How do we accept this invitation? I heard about a story of Robert Fulghum, the writer who wrote All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. He was in a presentation, and he was asked to take out his wallet and put it on the table. And other people were asked to take their purses out and put them on the table. And so there was a little bit of laughter, a little anxious laughter, but he did it. He was game. And then the woman leading the exercise said, okay, now take out all the contents of the wallet. Take it all out. Dump your purses on the table. And there's more nervous laughter. Some people are probably going to the bathroom so that they can get in their cars and leave, right? But Fulghum, he's game, so he takes out everything and puts it all on the table and begins to go through it. Credit cards, driver's license, old business cards, pictures of grandchildren, a note that says, take the dog to the vet. He wondered if he ever did that. He's looking at all this stuff, and then the woman leading the exercise asks, is this what's most important to you? Is this what's most important in your life? You carry this around with you all the time. Is this where your priorities are at? Maybe yes. Maybe some of it yes. But other stuff isn't. And that's what Psalm 1 does. It sort of asks us, what are we doing? What are we carrying around? In what direction are we walking? All this stuff, is this what we really want to have with us? Now, if we wanted to sort of punch up Fulgham's example, you might want to take these out and put them on the table and start to look at all the stuff in here that we carry around. We've become experts at carrying around more stuff. We've turned it into zeros and ones, and now we have it all. We have it all with us. And so we ask, is this something that's helping me to accept God's invitation to joy and contentment and happiness? Or is it something that's blocking that? Or is it a bit of both? Is it sort of ambiguous? This thing that I carry around with me all the time. I was at a mentoring meeting of the Presbyterian. I'm now actually old enough to be a mentor. I have enough gray hairs that I can be a mentor. And so I was at a mentoring meeting with the young pastors in their first call, and Dick Ramsey was going to be there. He just retired. And so I said to Dick, oh, I'm planning on retiring too. And he said, you are? And he had a look on his face like he knew what I was going to say next. And I said, yes, I talked to the Board of Pensions, and if I retire now, I can get $15 every 2 weeks. And he said, well, maybe keep working then. But he talked about his experience of ministry and being married and working in the church and how he approaches premarital counseling. And he shared a story about a column that he used to read by a guy called Charlie Shedd. And Charlie Shedd wrote that you have Christ for eternity, your spouse for as long as you live, your children for as long as they'll have you, and your job for as long as you want it. And I said, oh, Dick, say that again. I want to remember that. And he said, sure. You have Christ for eternity. You have your spouse for as long as you live, hopefully. You have your children for as long as you want them, for as long as they'll have you, and you have your job for as long as you want it. Well, that, for me, is maybe a narrative way to do what Psalm 1 does, which is to invite us to reprioritize, to think about the good life, this way that is open before us, this way that we're being invited to follow in. You know, we always hear that passage that Susan read so well from John 14, where Jesus offers comfort to the disciples. And then Thomas, you always have to have a student like Thomas. He says, What are you talking about? We don't possibly know. And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. We always sort of treat that as the end of a lot of conversations that we have. But I realize more and more that it's really the beginning. It's an invitation to the good life, to follow God, to follow Jesus, to follow the Spirit in this way of contentment and true happiness. Star Wars comes out in 200 days. You can follow that on the website. But God's invitation opens up to us today. May we accept God's invitation to true joy and contentment and happiness today and tomorrow and forever. Amen.